Hello, I'm Casey Aiken, and this is 21 This Week. Coming up next, Maryland Primary Day is Tuesday, May 14th. Can David Trone hold off Angela Alsobrooks? Who will win the mudslinging CD6 race? And will disaffected Republicans vote for former Governor Larry Hogan? And more. Our panel of insiders will give you the story behind the story. We're joined by former county council member and president at Rebuilding Together Montgomery County, Nancy Floreen, and vice chairman of the Montgomery County Republican Central Committee, Stacey Sauter. Stay tuned for these stories and more on the next 21 This Week. There are very exciting things to discuss regarding this year's Senate race in Maryland. Both parties have interesting candidates running and are hotly contested. The Maryland Senate Democratic primary race is considered by many to be in a dead heat, according to recent polls. Nancy, this race features 6th District Congressman David Trone running against County Executive of Prince George's County, Angela Alsobrooks. Mr. Trone has, according to polls, held the early lead. What's your assessment of this race?
Well, it's gotten interesting. There's been Mr. Trone has spent, gazillions of dollars on this race. Miss Angela Brooks seems to be coming up the side here. She's gotten an increased number of support, most recently by all the former heads of the Democratic Party in the state of Maryland. Now, that's very unusual. For former party heads to take a position on a Democratic primary, usually, they just stand back and permit the race to go on its own. So, you don't usually see Ike Leggett endorsing a primary candidate the way he was shown just recently. So it appears to be quite the horse race.
So, Stacey, Trone has spent just an ungodly amount of money, as Nancy alluded to in the opening, to secure the nomination. What is your assessment of this race and how it matches up for you guys?
Well, I agree with Nancy's assessment that it's really turned into a horse race. And according to the latest poll that just came out from Emerson College, The Hill, and DC News Now, it is going to be a photo finish. They have Angela Alsobrooks up 1 point over Trone with a margin of error of 3 points. So it's very, very close. Listen, she is a very accomplished, polished politician. She's the underdog in this story. If she wins, it's going to be a big story for quite a while.
Well, I think it's fascinating, frankly. I mean, personally, and I've said this before on the air, I have to wonder about someone's motivation to spend that much money on a U.S. Senate seat. I mean, a U.S. Senate seat's important. I worked in the Senate for Senator Scoop Jackson, and I know how important it can be, but it just still seems like I'd love to know the motivation that goes behind this.
In response to that, I think, and I don't know, but if you have all that money, you don't think about the details. You just say, spend whatever. I mean, it's a godsend for all those pollsters and campaign people and video production people out there. They can, it's really expensive to run a race like this. And I'm sure they say, sure, let's do this, let's do that. But I don't think that's really high on Mr. Trone's mind. I mean, what's in it? This is a reminder that money isn't everything in a race. And that's certainly been shown in the Montgomery County elections as well. So,
well, I'm glad Mr. Trone is supporting the Biden economy. So I want to go back. I want to go back to you, Stacey. In the Republican primary, former Governor Larry Hogan is running, and he's being attacked on the right by candidate Robin Ficker. In the last election, some Republicans were disaffected or disenchanted with Governor Hogan, including, they nominated and elected Dan Cox, who was virulently anti-Hogan. What's going to happen in this race?
Well, I've said this before. You've heard me say this before. This is Larry Hogan's race to lose. However, Robin, in a self-funding effort, has really put out some polished advertising, and I think it might be making a dent. I don't think it's going to make a difference. I will say that I do know some conservatives who are throwing their support behind John Myrick instead of Robin Ficker. So those hardcore conservatives, if Dan Cox wins in the CD6 primary, we'll have somebody to vote for there. Don't know if they'll sit on their hands if Hogan wins the primary. I don't know if they'll sit on their hands in the general election or not. But again, it's, I believe, Hogan's to lose.
Okay, Nancy, assuming Hogan wins, who's the better matchup for the general election?
Anybody on the Democratic ticket. Well, let's agree that this race is about Biden versus Trump. And so the party regulars are going to show up in droves. And people, by and large, don't look at the ballot and say, oh, I'll pick one from this column and one from this column. It's going to be pure party line voting all the way down, I suspect. And I think either David or Angela will win.
Well, Stacey, I'll give you the last word on that. Seems to me they split tickets for Larry Hogan before.
Well, this is true, but I would also like to note that there are a lot more unaffiliateds now, and they have 37% in some polls showing people that have not decided yet. So I think that that's a clear indication that this could be anybody's race right now.
Well, I can't wait till Tuesday and we see the final results of the primaries, because this has been a fascinating primary season. Let's go to the next race, which is in the 6th Congressional District race, district being vacated by Congressman Trone. There is once again a very competitive primary challenge in both parties. And while the Democratic primary has seen the greatest media interest, the Republican primary has featured several impressive candidates. And Stacey, you alluded to that just a minute ago, talking about who's going to win the CD6 Republican primary.
So listen, and you just said the word, there are a lot of impressive candidates in this race. And I think that it is going to be very competitive, surprisingly competitive, especially among the top money earners in this race so far. They're all highly qualified candidates. Any one of them would serve well. It's going to be interesting, to your point just a moment ago, to see how this shakes out in the primary, who the winner is actually going to be. Because like I said, I think that any one of them could serve well. And I think the voters have a really good array of choices here this year.
Well, you're being very political and polite, not to mention anybody. I know in your position that's tough. Nancy, the Democratic primary race has become very heated between April McLean Delaney and Delegate Joe Vogel, but they're not the only candidates in this race. Tell us about it.
Well, I think they're the only candidates to watch. And, Vogel has been picking a fight with Ms. Delaney. Going negative rarely works well. It brings attention to the other party. It creates a sympathy vote. You got to think long and hard before you go negative in a campaign, because that can really come back to bite you. And I think that's just helping her as the campaign progresses. We'll see. But, in this case, money will make a difference, and she's got it.
Well, but what I find fascinating, and Stacey, I want to bring you in on this, is Vogel is attacking Delaney from the left, hard from the left. And this is a very interesting district where it's thought to be a toss-up district, even though it leans Democratic. If Vogel wins the nomination, his hard left stance, will that help the Republican candidate? Nancy's shaking her head.
Oh, so, absolutely. We would love that if that were the case. Yes, it would make it far easier for the Republican nominee in CD6 to run.
Well,
Nancy, you're shaking your head no. I think you're shaking your head no. What do you think?
No, I actually agree. I think I wouldn't assume anything about Congressional District 6. It's right down the middle. It's gotten more moderate over the years, but it's always been heavily Republican, and it's a difficult race to win. It's a big district. There's a lot of traveling involved, and I wouldn't assume anything about I don't think that a far left candidate is going to do well there, period.
That's fascinating. So we're going to take a quick break here, and we're going to go on to our next topic. When we come back from this short break, the county school board race has been in the news in the past year. What interest will that play in the school board elections this year? Stay tuned.
When I first saw Turtle, my heart was full. Now I'm anything but lonely.
We had this deep connection, this heart connection.
He just wants to be close to you and part of your life.
Every day with Turtle is a perfect day.
When I'm holding her, it makes me feel calmer.
I think everything he does shows how much he loves us.
When we adopt a shelter pet, we discover they're a little bit of a lot of things.
But they're all pure love.
Jordan knows he shouldn't eat this entire bowl of nachos, but tonight he's earned that right because a few hours ago in the middle of happy hour, he recognized a sign, not from the gods or a bolt of lightning, but from a double heart, a kissy face, and a fourth ha in ha ha ha. That's when Jordan knew he was buzzed. So when it was time to go, he got a ride home instead of driving. Be a legend like Jordan. Recognize your buzzed warning signs and get a ride home. Buzz driving is drunk driving.
And welcome back. School board elections are the hardest campaigns to cover since they don't gather the same media attention as the higher profile county council races, despite the fact the importance of the Montgomery County public school system has on our community, not to mention the budget of Montgomery County. Nancy, there are 3 positions up for elections. This is what's considered a nonpartisan ballot, as you know. In the at-large race, incumbent Lynn Harris has 5 challengers. Given the controversy the past few years, does Lynn Harris deserve another term in office?
Well, I think the issue for voters is who is Lynn Harris and who are the other candidates. These folks are not known, perhaps within the PTA community, but the voters who are looking at this list may well take a pass on a lot of these choices if they don't know who the candidates are, and that's true of the whole collection of school board candidates. Or they'll just pick something, which does happen. I think the school board races are a real roll of the dice for those folks running and for the voters, because there's very little information. The one thing that's out there is the Apple ballot. A lot of people bring that into the polls with them. And that may be determinative this year more than anything as to who makes it to the general election.
But we've really had a lot of controversy over the last few years with the school board. So are incumbents going to do better because of that, or are they just people going to see incumbent and vote against them, do you think?
Yeah, well, I would say if you know who the incumbent is, that there are a fair number of people who say, I'm not voting for anybody on any incumbent on the Board of Ed. I've heard that from folks, but I don't know that that reflects the general view because I'm not sure how much people pay attention to exactly who those people may be. We'll see.
And that's something, isn't it? Stacey, what are your thoughts on the at-large race? And then I want to talk about the District 2 race.
Well, I think that one of the most important things to note about this race is that those incumbents are not being supported by the teachers' unions. What does that tell you? Okay, so that opens it up to a more competitive race. And the Blue Book, actually, the Blue Book ballot that's being circulated has picked up a lot of support, it appears. And so they have the Blue Book, UARE is the organization that supports that. They are at the at-large race supporting Fitzgerald Mofor. So he's a former teacher, he's a paralegal, he seems to have some good credentials, very motivated. It'll be interesting to see how this pans out.
Well, let's talk about now. Let's talk about. I'm sorry.
Can I just
Nancy.
comment on that? One thing about the teachers union, and I used to get in trouble for saying anything back when I was in politics. But the teachers union, remember, we're talking about a huge budget. Teachers union wants everything they could possibly get. And that's why they don't support certain candidates. They don't support people who say no. or let's talk about it. So there are two sides to that story. And so it's maybe most people don't know that or don't think about that, but it is relevant to the ultimate decisions that the Board of Ed ends up making. And, the role of the union is huge. And they have the money to campaign, unlike anybody else.
Yeah. So, Stacey, I'm going back to you on the District 2 race, where Rebecca Sombrowski is being challenged by 4 challengers. Tell us a little bit about that race, and then let's talk about District 4.
Well, I think that it's very competitive right now between Brenda Diaz and Ricky Moy. If I'm pronouncing his last name correctly, I'm sorry if I'm not. But again, you have a situation there where the incumbent is not being endorsed. To your point earlier, I'd like to say that while the school board elections and races might generally be very low key, this past year in particular, it has been very high profile. We've had a lot of protests going on, at the school board. There were 3 or 4 of them this past year that did get media coverage. We just had the acting superintendent had to testify before Congress yesterday with regard to anti-Semitism in Montgomery County, along with school superintendents from Berkeley and New York City. What does that tell you about the viewpoint of Montgomery County in the scheme of things, that they're promoting anti-Semitism, it seems, and so they're being called before Congress on this? This is getting a lot of attention, and we have a large number of Jewish voters that send their kids to public schools here in Montgomery County. It's going to be very interesting to see.
Very valid point, Stacey. But I want, before we run out of time, I want to talk about the District 4 race, where incumbent Sherba Evans has 2 challengers, including noted activist Bethany Mandel. What can you tell us about this race, Nancy?
I can't tell you anything. I think, again, has the word gotten out to voters across the county? Remember, this is the only ballot that unaffiliated voters can vote on. We'll see what they say. See if they, although the turnout from that group has not been very large so far. We'll see what they say.
Let me ask you a technical question. It's the top 2 vote getters in each district that advance to November, correct?
I think so.
Okay, Stacey.
There'll be several candidates on the ballot for each position.
Stacey, tell us about District 4.
So in District 4, Bethany Mandel is probably the biggest standout there right now because she's got a high profile to begin with, and she was one of the people that actually was called to testify before Congress yesterday. So her profile continues to expand. She's very adamant about, what the kids are being taught, what she feels is improper, and is one of the leading voices for parents and groups like Moms for Liberty that feel the same way, that they have a problem with some of the material that their children, young children in particular, I should say, are being exposed to in the Montgomery County public school system. They want to be able to opt their children out of certain curricula, and it's been a battle for them ever since it's come to light what the children are being taught.
Well, there have been other candidates that have professed the same sentiments, and they haven't done well. So we're going to have to wait and see how this election shakes out. Thank you both for giving us that insight. Stay tuned for parting shots.
Hey world, I have a quick message. It's about safe driving. All right, let's go. Anytime you're driving, have the seatbelt buckled tight. Both hands on the wheel and your phone out of sight. When not in your hand trying to text somebody back. Because if you do, your car might get smacked. The moral of the story, just put your phone down. The people on the road will stay safe and sound. Put your phone down, put your phone down. People on the road will stay safe and sound. Yeah.
Jordan knows he shouldn't eat this entire bowl of nachos, but tonight he's earned that right. Because a few hours ago in the middle of happy hour, he recognized a sign. Not from the gods or a bolt of lightning, but from a double heart, a kissy face, and a 4th ha in ha ha ha. That's when Jordan knew he was buzzed. So when it was time to go, he got a ride home instead of driving. Be a legend like Jordan. Recognize your buzzed warning signs and get a ride home. Buzz driving is drunk driving.
When I first saw a turtle, my heart was full. Now anything but lonely.
We have this deep connection, this heart connection.
He just wants to be close to you and part of your life.
Every day with turtle is a perfect day.
When I'm holding her, it makes me feel calmer.
I think everything he does shows how much he loves us.
When we adopt a shelter pet,
We discover
they're a little bit of a lot of things.
But they're all
Pure
pure
love.
love.
Welcome back. Now with parting shots, Nancy Floreen.
Well, we're in primary election season and things are getting hotter and heavier as we reach the finish line. So I want to encourage everybody to get out there and vote. If you haven't mailed your absentee ballot, get it in the mailbox ASAP. Those are going to be counted more rapidly than they used to be counted in the past. So we'll know pretty soon what those results are like. And otherwise, show up on Tuesday. Find your local polling place and get there. I'm going to be an election judge. I've been working this week in the early voting sites, and we're encouraging more and more people to show up. We also need people to volunteer to help in the future, particularly you people of Republican affiliation. We end up having more unaffiliated people as the non-democratic people than actual Republicans. So it'd be nice to see a real mix of volunteers in the polls, working the polls in the future.
Well, it's a great thing that you're doing. Thank you, Nancy. Stacey, Sauter, what's your parting shot?
Well, first, I'd like to thank Nancy for that public service announcement because we are working to try to get more Republicans to fill those vacancies at the polls. People need to understand that it's not a full day anymore. They have broken it up into shifts. They actually get some remuneration for this. And it's, you're doing some great civic duty by getting out there and serving at the polls. There are many different jobs that you can have. So we've been doing our own recruiting in-house. And also, I'd like to dovetail what Nancy said about getting to the polls on May 14th. If you haven't voted already by absentee ballot, there has been a significant bump up in the absentee voting this year, or the mail-in ballots, and the Republicans have done a really strong push to get our voters to do this. And so I'm hoping that we're going to see a greater Republican turnout that way. And it's really critical this year to get out and vote. And the Republicans are alive and well here in Montgomery County, and we're doing our best we can to turn things around.
Well, thank you. Thank you both. As a political talk show, I try to keep track of, when the primary is. But I have to admit, even though I saw, the remote voting booths going up at some of the recreation centers in along the way, I kind of lost track of the number of days. And so when I finally dawned on me, my gosh, it's next week. We got to start doing something. It really surprised me. Anyway, thank you both. Great analysis about the election. I can't wait for next week when we can talk about who won and who lost and why they won and lost. That's always great fun to handicap and try to figure out what's going on. I want to thank you for appearing this week and every week, and I want to thank the audience for tuning in each and every week to Montgomery County's hardest hitting political talk show. For 21 this week, I'm Casey Aiken.